I'll let Helen introduce herself very, very quickly, though I'll just run through some of the Sport Birmingham team that are here, and I'll let them introduce themselves too. First off, I'm Alice, and I'm the Community Projects Manager at Sport Birmingham. And Sam, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi all. I know a few of you in the room, but there are some new faces too, so good to meet you. My name's Sam Payne. I'm a project officer at Sport Birmingham, and I predominantly focus on children and young people.
Thanks, Sam. And Nikki?
Sorry, just unmuting. My name's Nikki English, and I'm project officer at Sport Birmingham.
Thanks, Nikki. And Adam?
Sorry, I was just learning how to unmute. Yeah, hi, Adam, Sport Birmingham, workforce manager, supporting a variety of projects on volunteering and coaching.
Great, thanks, Adam. And Jevon, who is a guest with us today, and you'll hear from later. Jevon, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Jevon, and I'm the Director and Youth Community Lead for Sports Key, based in Birmingham. Great, thanks, Jevon. Right, I don't believe I've missed anybody, and not that I can see everyone. I should really know who on the team is on the call. Right, well, I'll hand over to Helen, who will go ahead and introduce herself and run through a presentation with you this morning. Thanks, Helen.
Morning, everybody. Thanks, Alice. Just before we start, just want to let everybody know that we will be recording the session today. If you want to look back on it, please do, because we will probably put this on our website just for any people that aren't available today to join the session. So as you can see, this is the format of today's session. So welcome and overview. You'll hear from Jevon, who was a recipient of the Phase 1 Tackling Inequalities funding. So you get the chance to ask him any questions that you like about that fund and how it was used. I will then go through the funding guidance and the application form, and then we'll follow that with question and answer session and then close the session. So we should be done by 12 o'clock today. Okay, so what is Tackling Inequalities Fund? So some of you may have heard of it, and it was part of Sport England's emergency response. At the start of lockdown, they had a £210 million support package that they released at the start of lockdown to support the sport and physical activity sector going through the coronavirus crisis. The fund was put in place at £20 million nationally, and that was put in place really to help to reduce the negative impact of coronavirus and those inequalities, stopping them being widened further in sports and physical activity. The fund's really for the here and now, so you'll hear later on in the session about what you can actually use the funding for. So it's more about the here now over the next 6 months rather than a long-term solution to the problem. So the aim is to work with some priority audiences. At the start of lockdown, it became clear that there were a number of audiences or target groups that were disproportionately affected by the crisis. These groups already facing certain inequalities, and then this just made that inequality even wider really. So those 4 priority audiences that Sport England identified through using their insight and data were low socio-economic groups, minority ethnic communities, people with disabilities and people with long-term health conditions. Therefore, the fund is really focused on supporting these priority audiences. So we have already run Phase 1 of this fund. So we received £110,000 in June to support local organisations and clubs across the city. We ran this as a closed application process based on insight and data that we held around indices of multiple deprivation, health inequalities, where minority ethnic groups were based across the city. And we used some of this data really to identify those areas of highest need, hence why we did it as a closed application. We funded we have funded 34 organisations through the phase 1 period with an average grant of just over £3,000. So they've ranged from 1,200 right through to the maximum, which is £4,500. And as you can see there, this has been broken down into 44% of those that applied, their priority audience was minority ethnic groups, 35% was focusing on low socio-economic groups, 15% people with disabilities, and then 6% their priority audience was people with long-term health conditions. So a real range really of what the focus was across Birmingham. So we're hoping to try and even that out across phase 2. So that's just a really brief overview of what we've done in phase 1. Phase 2 is going to be slightly different, but we're going to hear from Jevon now from Sportskey, who was a recipient of the phase 1 funding, just to tell us about the impact it's had, what the project was that they ran, and just give you some ideas of how you might run your project or what you'll put in your application when you come to apply. So I'll hand over to Jevon for now. Thanks, Jevon.
Thanks, Helen. Good morning, everyone, again. First, I'd just like to say thank you to Sport Birmingham for the support over the last 3 months with the Tackling and Inequalities Fund, which essentially helped us re-engage our audience at a critical time, especially after the lockdown period where there was just a high need for people to get active again. So that fund really helped us. I'll talk briefly about how we engaged with our young people in particular during the lockdown period. Then I'll give a quick breakdown of what we actually applied for, and then the outcomes from the project or from the recovery programme itself and how it was utilised. So Sportskey, we're a community-led organisation, and typically we engage with BAME and marginalised groups. And within our audience, we've recognised that there's a strong need for people to stay active and stay within the community that that they're familiar with. So within our community programmes, we applied for the Tackling Inequalities Fund to help people stay engaged. And we managed to predominantly put back on our activities, such as netball, football, and badminton, which are our core programmes. And what this helps us do, sorry.
Technical difficulties, Jevon.
Yeah, bear with me. Yeah, just take over for 1 moment, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So I suppose as Jevon started to say that this funding's being used as a way to re-engage audiences during that lockdown period, there have been groups that we've found have become isolated, disengaged. And so when you are looking to apply for the funding, really think about those audiences and how the funding can be used in their best interests. We've had a real range, as I said, we've had a range of organisations that have applied, those from minority ethnic communities and those from low socio-economic groups have been the highest proportion, but it doesn't mean that we've not wanted to focus on people with long-term health conditions and disabilities. It's just those were the organisations that did apply and that were focused on. So when I go on to talk about phase 2, we will be ring fencing, and many of you will have seen that actually the first round of phase 2 is going to be focused on people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, just to make sure that those groups do really get a good slice of the pie, really, to put it bluntly. Jevon, I'll move on, and then if you want to come in at a later part of the presentation, I think that'll be better, just so we can move on, and then we can come back to you when you're ready, if that's okay. Okay, so phase 2 then. So as I've already mentioned some of this information, but we have received another £110,000 for phase 2, so same amount that we received in phase 1. This fund is now open, as you all know, and we have until the end of January to submit all of the applications that we approve to Sport England, and then organisations will have a 6-month period to deliver those projects and spend the funding. So from the date of receiving those funds. So if you receive your funding at the end of January, then you'll have a following 6 months to spend it. As I've already mentioned, the focus of phase 2 is going to be broken up into 2 rounds. We're going to focus on people with disabilities and long-term health conditions in this first round, and that one is open now with a closing date of the 6th of November. So it does feel tight, but it's just all around how we will approve those, how it will go, the process we have to go through around the panel. So the sooner we get them in, then obviously we have to come back and ask certain questions on some of those applications. We will have time, giving us as much chance really to make sure that those applications that are approved do get then approved by Sport England. And then round 2 will be open to all of the priority audiences. So people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, that will still be a focus for round 2, but what we're saying is in round 1 that money is ring-fenced, so we won't be accepting applications for priority audiences from the other 2 groups. The format is the same as phase 1, so it's ring-fenced. So what I'm going to do in a moment, I'm going to take you to the page where you can actually then download the guidance and application form, just in case people haven't managed to do that yet. You can find it in a couple of places on our website. So go to sportbirmingham.org/community or /funding. You'll then be able to download the PDF version of the form, and then from there you can click onto the online form, which is actually a survey monkey. So what we've done is we've given you the guidance and the questions for the application form in the PDF version, so you can actually look at those questions, work out what you want to write under each of those questions, and actually if you type it into a Word document prior to then going onto the online form, just because it's a survey monkey, so you can only complete it in one sitting. So rather than going in, starting to complete it, realising that actually you haven't got all the information that you need, then you've got to go away, it won't save, so you have to start again next time you log in. So please be mindful of that before you do go onto the online form. And what we've put on there is there are some word limits. Please stick to them. If you do go over the word limits, then we might not be able to read beyond that, just because we actually envisage that we're going to get quite a high number of applications. And please complete all of the questions, because it will save us having to come back to you. And if we do get a high amount of applications, we may not have a chance to come back to you. So we want you to give yourselves the best chance of your application being approved. So in this fund, there are various things that you can apply for. The types of activities that can be funded are funding for community groups to find new ways of keeping active during this time. You might want to use the funding to provide advice and training. You might use it to increase your resilience, your capacity, and just the overall capability of the organisation. So those costs that you can include are for staffing, for facility hire and rent. Obviously, we do realise that you may look at the next 6 months and go, do you know what, with everything moving into tier 1, 2, 3, maybe going up and down those, doing face-to-face delivery might be difficult, so you may want to look at some digital solutions to that as well. And in phase 1, we did fund organisations to do online delivery, as well as a mix of face-to-face and online delivery. So really look at what would be the best solution for your priority audience. We can fund PPE, so personal protective equipment. That's around like gloves, masks. Obviously, we'd look for reusable masks as the better option. Sprays, antibacterial wipes, things to wipe down your equipment, which obviously would be something that's really important at this moment in time. And then the funding can be used around training and insurance. So I'm going to try some technical wizardry, and the team will be impressed if I manage this without needing any help, so just bear with me. There we go. Well done me. So that that has just taken us to the PDF that is on the website. So it gives you the guidance, the introduction, basically what I've just ran through, the priority audiences, what can be funded, which I've obviously just spoken about, what those costs can include. And then we go on to the actual criteria.
Helen, it's not appearing on the screen.
Is it not? Okay, thank you. Just bear with me. I thought I'd really done it then. I was really impressed with myself. Just bear with me.
Oh, it's working. It's working for myself. Is there anybody else that's having trouble with viewing the presentation?
Yeah, Julie's just put in the chat, can't see PDF.
Helen, I think you need to share your desktop when opening separate files rather than just the PowerPoint.
Let's have a look at that.
Bear with us, everyone. We're getting to it.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So that's better for those that couldn't see initially. Let me just look at the chat.
Yes, thanks, Helen.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. I'll carry on. So for those that didn't see, this is when you first click onto the document, it's just the introduction, those groups that I've mentioned, what can be funded, sorry. And then we go on to the eligibility around checking really that you are eligible for the funding. These are some key questions we want you to ask yourselves before you actually go about applying and going through that whole time and process to do that. So will this investment impact upon at least one of the priority audiences? So for round one, people with disability or long-term health condition, it needs to impact on one of those priority audiences. If it doesn't, then unfortunately it wouldn't be eligible. Is there a real here and now requirement? So that 6 month time frame, as I said, it's not necessarily about the long term, although we want organisations to be sustainable, and there might be some training costs that you build into your application, where it might be training up volunteers. So then obviously once they do have the right qualifications, then that means that you can rely more on volunteers, and it might help the organisation to be a bit more sustainable as you move throughout the winter and into next year. Has the requirement arisen as a direct result of your organisation or community group or audience being adversely affected as a result of COVID-19? So we really need people to demonstrate and articulate in the application form, and like you will see the breakdown of questions to really demonstrate that that audience has been negatively impacted. So it might be, for example, that some people with disabilities, they may be more vulnerable at the moment because of their disability or health condition. So actually they're staying at home, they're not even going out, they're not engaging because they've been isolating or shielding. So really think about how this whole situation has impacted that audience, and then how your project is going to bring in a solution for them, whether, like I said, whether it's digital or it's face-to-face, if that is possible. The next one is, will this investment help your organisations continue to survive or connect to one of the priority audiences? So again, really ask yourselves that, are you in need of that funding? Are you kind of on the edge? Like there will be organisations where they have been absolutely impacted financially by the last 6-7 months. So really think about the way you articulate that within your application. And then, is there a clear line of sight from this investment to physical activity taking place either now or in the immediate future? So we have had some questions around whether gardening could be funded. Now, gardening can be funded as long as it's not the primary activity. So if it's part of a wider activity programme and gardening is one of the elements of that, that should be fine depending on what the rest of the project is about. But we can't fund just gardening on its own. And I know people may go, well, that is physical activity, but in terms of like the Sport England view on it, it wouldn't be something that they would fund just on its own.
We've got a similar scenario there as well, Helen. Just around healthy eating and cooking and cookery and things like that, albeit a really good tool to use, engaging, especially with families and young people and such, and especially if you're using any virtual sessions. There does need to be a clear physical activity leading that project. More than happy to have healthy food, healthy eating kind of classes or sessions alongside that physical activity, but it really has to have a clear physical activity lead as part of the project.
Yeah, thanks Alice, thanks for that. So I'm going to move on to some training needs now, and Adam's going to run through this, just where people can bring in any training needs into their application, and then how Sport Birmingham can support you with actually setting up those courses or getting people qualified. So I'll leave it to you, Adam, for this next section.
Thanks, Helen. Helen mentioned the need to develop volunteers, build capacity, or even sustain capacity in your organisations. And we do see the Tackling Inequalities Fund as an opportunity to support that. From two angles really. One is your traditional formal learning and qualifications opportunity. So within the application, we've got a range of opportunities that we've identified as critical to the COVID response and the sort of the returning to play needs of organisations we've worked with in phase 1 of the fund. So I guess that the opportunities vary a lot more than they did maybe 6 months ago. So maybe majority of you may have done face-to-face training in a number of the options that we've presented in this document. However, there is now a whole range of self-directed virtual learning and online classrooms available. So we have listed those on the document, and they range from everything from the safeguarding, child protection and first aid, to looking more broadly at resilience, transferable skills that your workforce might need at this time. So Helen mentioned things like, COVID response around PPE, around risk assessments, all those sorts of things that you may as an organisation have done, but now having to do additional risk assessments and plans around returning to activity in your organisation. So there's a range of training linked to that, and the Educare Sport Package, as an example, provides things around online safety, GDPR. So if you're doing virtual activity for the first time, there's those sort of short, sharp intro courses that can provide you information around that. There's obviously the more traditional training you'll be aware of, which is now back up and running. So if you have needs around safeguarding, first aid, etc., that your workforce need to get themselves back up and qualified again, they're now available face-to-face or online. And then I think something we've really identified recently is the lack of, I guess, some volunteers coming back or workforce coming back to the organisations you'll be a part of, and a need to then upskill new people or identify and work with new people within your organisation. And that could be participants who are now stepping up to a volunteer role or a leadership role, or it could be that you've engaged with new groups in your community and they're looking to take a lead. So those training opportunities are absolutely there to support all of those groups, and we're also open to having further conversations with organisations about that, because if we see needs across the applications that we can provide shared opportunities and shared learning, we're really keen to do that. The other piece of training that we've identified here is something that is free, a free offer from the Club Matters team, which is another Sport England funded programme, and that's to support organisational sustainability and development. So obviously you'll be looking to access funding to run your project and programme, but actually there's a whole range of support to look at the wider needs of your organisation. So that can look at marketing, fundraising, the experience that you're creating for your participants, and even financial sustainability. So there's a whole range of topics available, and I'm conscious there's a lot there. But what we were looking for people to do is to consider the costs, consider the needs of the people in your organisation, and include those as part of your application going forward. The last part of this is we've also have opportunities to provide mentoring support. So we're conscious that training, whether that's self-directed or in a classroom space, can only go so far, and actually where we get the sustainability and the engagement over a longer period of time is that ongoing support. So we really want to work with organisations to provide one-to-one where appropriate, but also bring organisations together to support each other. So if you've got a strength in a particular area which you can share with another group, and vice versa, that's the type of approach we're looking to take, and create support networks for you as organisations. So but the key point there really is to include those needs within your application, and if there's things on there that aren't present but you think are really important to you, then either have a conversation with myself or Helen, or as I say, you can just add that in yourself. But it's how that relates back to, as Helen talked about, physical activity and the needs of your project as a whole. That's
Thanks,
me, I think.
Adam. Yeah, thank you. That was really useful. And as Adam said, if you do have any further questions, please do let us know if it's not included on the guidance there. So I'm just going to run through the process. Once you do submit the application form, it will go to our Sport Birmingham internal panel, and there will be people from colleagues from Sport Birmingham, but we're also welcoming colleagues from other external partners who can support us with this process, particularly those that may be focused on working with people with disabilities and long-term health conditions themselves, or work within the community, so that they can just give another perspective, obviously following all the criteria, but just another perspective on the applications. So then once we approve an application, that will then be sent to Sport England to go towards their grant moderation panel. And then if it's approved, they will notify us, and then we will notify you as the approved organisation. We will send out service level agreement and the financial forms, etc. We'll put all of that within an emailing your approval letter, and then the grant will be awarded. Following that, which I haven't included here, is there will be a monitoring and evaluation form that we will expect you to complete following the programme. Obviously, if anything changes massively throughout your programme from what you applied for, please notify us, please keep us up to date. We can support you through that process if things haven't gone the way you'd hoped. We've had a couple of organisations where they'd obviously wanted to deliver face-to-face activity, and then the tier systems come in. It's meant that they've not been able to deliver what they put into their phase 1 application. So please speak to us, keep us up to date, so then we can support you and your needs as best we can. I'm just going to stop there and just see, has anyone got any specific questions on the guidance?
We had a quick question from Simon Lancaster, just around whether or not the fund can be used as match funding.
Yes, that real question. So you can, if you've got other funding that you can put towards this, great, but it's absolutely not necessary. And to be honest, if it's kind of coming from your reserves, then please let us know, but it might mean that you're not necessarily one of the organisations that's in the greatest financial need, if that makes sense. However, if you're receiving funding from elsewhere to support the programme, which we did for a few of the phase 1 applications, that's great. Please let us know. It all helps really, and the more more value for money you can get from the funding, then great. And if it tackles it tackles more of those inequalities and attracts more participants, then great.
Yeah, no, it was kind of linking. I'm doing a VI tennis session from November. Now they've already got funding from November to December for 6 weeks, but I know that funding will run out at 6 weeks.
Okay.
So my thinking behind it was, can I build in that session into a wider project, basically?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, Simon. So yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Were there any other questions, Alice?
Not so far, so unless
Okay.
anybody else wants to quickly jump in. One example I was just going to give in terms of support, if you do find things are wavering with your project or engagement, as Helen said, I really would encourage you speaking with us. We've recently supported one group in just getting the word out around their project. I think they found that they weren't getting the attention they hoped for. So again, as Sport Birmingham and as an organisation with a decent amount of reach, we've looked over her communications for the project, just rejigged a little bit with her, and then made sure that we're getting it out to as wide an audience as possible. So by all means, do use us within reason, but we definitely want you to communicate any struggles along the way. You're not going to get a smack on the wrists or anything.
No, we certainly wouldn't be looking to take the funding from you. So it's, yeah, the more you can keep us up to date with any changes to your project plan, the better it is, really. So now I'm just going to go on to the application form. From the PDF, you can click on this link online and that will take you to the SurveyMonkey. So here are all the questions. As I said, it is a PDF, so once you consider submitting your application, just type it in a Word document and then it'll just be a case of copy and paste rather than starting it in SurveyMonkey and it wouldn't save. So as it says here, please keep to the word limits. We want all of the questions to be completed. So this first section is all around your organisational details, so fairly straightforward. Your organisation type. So we would hope that you would all fit within one of these organisation types. If it's not one of the ones listed and it's other, please state that on the application form so that we can make the decision whether you are eligible or not. The next section is around your priority group. So as we've already mentioned, this first round is focusing on one of these groupings, people with a disability or long-term health condition. We then would like to know what your secondary priority group is. So it might be, if the first one is people with a disability, secondary, potentially people from low socio-economic groups. Or it might not fall within that. So it might be older people, it might be children and young people, women and girls. So please state what it would be as your secondary, just so it helps us to understand the broader picture as well. Because we know that when you work with one group, it's not just one group, that there's a multitude of factors and backgrounds that those people have. So what the next bit is telling us about your organisation. Please don't expect us to know what your organisation does. And because this then goes on to Sports England, they won't necessarily know your organisation. So please tell us what you do, even if we've worked with you for the last 5 years. Please put it down. So who your target audience is, where you're based within the city. So if you can put your district and the ward, please include that. The demographics. So if you know like your male, female age split, include that, please. That'd be really helpful, just so we understand what you do, who you are, and then what you deliver. If it's one sport or it's multi-sports, if sport is only one of the elements of something that you deliver. So we know that a lot of community organisations may have repurposed some of their delivery to do like food parcel deliveries over the last few months. So please include that. It's all useful. It can be submitted in bullet points, that's fine, so that you can keep to a 200 word limit for this one. We're not expecting full sentences, proper grammatical English, if even that's properly grammatically right. So yeah, please just include what you can in that section. Sorry, is there a question just come through?
Yeah, just from Steve. whether or not there is a specific list or a breakdown of the long-term health conditions. I was just responding saying that all will be considered, Steve. However, if anybody wants to have a more detailed conversation with us, I would recommend actually arranging and having a call with Helen or somebody else from the team. But otherwise, yeah, all conditions will be considered. There's no strict restrictions on that.
No, there's not. And include that in this section who your target audience is. So if you do have a specific disability or long-term health condition that you are wanting to focus on, please include it so we understand who you work with. So question 6, how has COVID affected your delivery and normal activities and operations? So please tell us how this may have impacted on income, expenditure, if you've even been able to run activity over the last few months. I know some people that their whole delivery has just ceased because of lack of access to facilities, funding that they rely on. So please tell us, again, there's a 300 word limit there. How's your target audience been affected? So this is around them, the participants specifically. So whereas question 6 is more about you as the organisation, how you've been affected. This next question is about how the individuals have been affected. So as Jevon started to tell us before, a lot of the young people felt isolated, they were disengaged, it may have affected their mental health and well-being. So please tell us about that. And then the next section, what is the proposed programme that you're applying for? How will you fund, how will the funding be used to tackle inequalities with your target audience? What your solutions may be, what your intended outcomes might be, and how the funding will be used. And then the next question is that breakdown of funding. Again, use bullet points if you feel that you can't put it all in, if you're using full sentences. We will hopefully get the gist of what you're trying to tell us. And if we do have any questions and we believe that your application is really feasible and it will work for this programme, then we will come back to you and find out a bit more, get a bit more detail from you. Were there any more questions that just came through then, Alice?
Just one that we've answered so far for Julie from Headway. She was just asking around actually specifying the disability or condition as the secondary. Okay. However, we have encouraged, we'd encourage you to put that down in your organisation and audience section. Helen, could you advise on that secondary section as to whether or not, if someone was struggling to maybe put in something for that secondary priority group, is that going to be a major knock-on effect or issue for their application?
No, not necessarily. If you just want to leave it as a primary priority group, that's fine. We definitely need the priority group, but secondary is it's not essential. But if you do have a secondary group, then please include it. It just helps with the context. But no, that's not necessarily going to mark you down if you don't include that. And then the next, so yeah, when you come onto your funding, please give a really detailed breakdown. So when you give staff costs, please don't just put £1,000 staff costs. We want to know this is for 2 coaches at £10 an hour times 12 sessions over however many weeks. That's the kind of level of detail we need so that we can spot in and can see where the money is going. And then if you can put volunteer expenses, volunteer costs in there, they need to be reasonable. And then facility costs. So there's lots of costs that you can include. But it just needs to be fairly detailed rather than just giving one overall cost. If you've received any additional funding, so probably similar to what Simon's talked about as well, if you're receiving funding from another place for this specific programme, or if you received any other additional funding since March, please tell us. We'd like to know what you've done with that funding. Again, this isn't going to mark you up or down. It's just helps us with the wider context of your organisation and how you probably coped during the last 6-7 months. And then please tell us if you've got a recovery and sustainability plan. If you've not, then as Adam's already mentioned, in that organisational support, we can support you with that if that's something that you're looking to do. We would like to think that you've got some kind of short-term plan just to get through the next few months. And obviously, if this funding is part of that plan, great. Think about how you can work in those training costs and anything else really, just to make sure that you do kind of come out of the winter a bit stronger, really. And then the last one, question 12, is around those training needs. Adam's already talked about it. Please include any of those needs and those costs as well that Adam has put those example costs in, so that you can include those in your final application. And then the next bit is just all the signatory stuff. And then once you're happy with your application, please submit it. Any questions?
We've just got another one through from Sharon. She's just asking around listing other funding that a organisation, club, etc., may have received for other projects, and whether or not they include any government grants, etc.
So yeah, please do. If you don't have to tell us, like, don't worry, we're not going to be checking all of those specific details, but it's just more around in the wider context of what you have received. There are a few things that I probably need to say. It is in the frequently asked questions, but I'll bring it up now. If you've received funding in phase 1 of this through the closed application process, we will not be accepting applications from you in phase 2, just because we believe that there's going to be a high demand for this funding, so we want to make sure that everybody does have a chance of getting that funding. This is going to be quite a competitive process, and so if we do see an application from a previously funded organisation from phase 1, unfortunately it might be a bit of a waste of your time. So we do think there may be some other funds available maybe in the future, and Sport England have just released some other funding, so I don't want to confuse people now, but if you look on Sport England's website, and we will be putting out the information about that around return to sport and things that can be funded through that fund as well. Just seen David, put your hand up.
Hello, yeah, Helen. Just a quick question. So we're set up as we were primarily a rugby club, but we've set up a CIC called Changing Lives Through Rugby. Is there a preferred organisation, or is there an organisation that would get looked at in a better light in terms of whether it's an NGB constituted club or a CIC?
No, again, it really doesn't matter. We're looking at the need for the funding and the priority audience, how the funding is going to be used. So I wouldn't worry too much about who is the applicant as such, or where the money is going to sit. As long as it gets to the participants and those most in need, we're quite happy for it to be either.
All right, brilliant. Thank you.
Just another quick one, Helen. You may want to get the application questions back up, but we've had from Julie. Is question 11 for the whole organisation or the sport project specifically?
The recovery sustainability plan, that question.
Yeah.
For the whole organisation, or if this is just part of your sport and physical activity side of the organisation, we understand that some organisations it's wider than just sport and physical activity. So it's entirely up to you. The more information you can give us about the wider context of the organisation, great. But if this is if you just want to put in the information about that specific project and how that might link to sustainability of the sport and physical activity elements of your organisation, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, essentially this kind of really provides us with an element of reassurance when funding an organisation, just to see that you have been able to maybe go through some processes of thought for future operations, and that's really just going to provide us with the reassurance that you're still going to be able to deliver after this funding. You're still going to have a presence within your community and your engagement to your participants once this funding has been spent.
Were there any other questions? I'm just going to go back to the main presentation, so just bear with me a second. Okay, so I've gone through that.
Just while you're in that transition period, I just wanted to give Vicky the opportunity to, not to put you on the spot, Vicky, but I know that you had some audio issues and had to come out and back in. So if there's anything you missed and you wanted to raise a question, then you're more than welcome to do so, or you're also more than welcome to just stay quiet if you don't have anything. I just wanted to give you the opportunity. No, okay.
Is it back on the presentation screen?
Yes.
It is. Okay, that's great. I will continue then. So we've already started to have some questions, but these are some of the frequently asked questions that I know people will be may be on their minds. So can organisations outside of Birmingham apply? In a nutshell, no. They can and can't. We need to support local people. So ideally, it will be Birmingham-based organisations that will be applying. However, we do understand that there might be some organisations that are based slightly outside of Birmingham, but they focus and work and they deliver their activities in Birmingham. So you need to be either based in Birmingham or working directly and delivering your activities in Birmingham to be able to apply. If you're not in Birmingham, all of the other active partnerships across the country are also disseminating this funding as well. So please check your local active partnership for details. We're all running them slightly differently. So they may have already started their application process, they may not. So please, if you're based in Wolverhampton, please go to the Active Black Country, for example, to find out details about their fund. So I think I've already mentioned this. We received funding in phase 1. Can we apply for phase 2? Unfortunately not. However, there are some funds that have been part of Sport England's emergency response to COVID. So there will be some organisations that may have received the emergency funding at the start of the lockdown period. Now in phase 1, we weren't accepting applications from these people. However, we will look at applications if you did receive the emergency funding, just because we do realise that that was very much around your utility costs, any immediate facility hire costs, etc. Whereas now this is more project-based and about delivery and re-engaging your audience. So we will accept from those that have received the Community Emergency Fund. Are there any sports and activities that are not eligible? So there is one, which is football. If it is if it's the only sport within the application. So if it's part of a multi-sport offer, we will accept the application. However, if it's football on its own, we will not. Now that is a directive from Sport England, because the Football Foundation did receive a high amount of investment at the start of or during the lockdown period. So if you are a football only organisation, we would suggest that you go directly to the Football Foundation. Obviously, if anyone's got anything extra, any questions about that, please contact me after. If we've got time within this session, we can have that conversation, but it might be a conversation for following this session. So I've already said we're in receipt of other Sport England funding. So if you've received the emergency fund, that's fine. If you've received in receipt of other Sport England funding, that's fine, as long as it's not duplicating what that Sport England funding is for. So we don't want people applying for additional costs to go into that programme, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I'm seeing a few questions coming. Alice, do you want to jump in there?
We've just got an interesting one from Sunita. She's asking whether or not a application and a successful application to this fund would exclude them from applying to other funding from Sport England in the future, or at least during this current climate.
So no, it shouldn't do. It shouldn't exclude you. It really does depend on what that funding is for during now or in the future. So it really is a case-by-case scenario. So we would want you to come and speak to us if you are worried that it may exclude you from something further down the line. So yeah, please speak to us directly on that one.
Again, I think just noting that we've got quite good communications with Sport England. So any questions that are coming through to us that we need to address with them, they're really engaging in that regard. So we'd encourage you to ask and to have that conversation. We've just had another one through from Vicky. If the organisation within Birmingham, but if they are outside, do they need to have pre-existing delivery in the area, or can they still apply if they are planning an activity in the area? So Vicky, do you want to just ask that question directly? I don't know if I've given it justice.
Hello, yeah. It was just, if we're an organisation that resides outside of Birmingham, would we need to have pre-existing delivery within the city, or is it something that we're planning for the future and we don't deliver currently? Is that going to be considered?
Yeah, good question. It will be considered, definitely. I think it's just making sure that there is a need for that project and demonstrating that in your application. And obviously, if it was something you were planning on delivering prior to lockdown, and obviously lockdown happened and it meant that you couldn't deliver it, then yeah, that's fine. But yeah, there's absolutely no prerequisite around existing activity. It's just making sure that the priority audience, it's needed for that priority audience, and you can justify the need for the project.
Perfect, thank you.
That's it for the chat box at the moment. I don't know if anybody else has anything quickly just on some of the points that have been raised.
I can see David's hand up, but was that from before, David? I'm not sure. Must have been from before. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll just carry on with these frequently asked questions. Will you fund capital projects? So no, we won't actually. This fund is around getting the money directly to the participants. However, as I did mention, Sport England have just released their return to sport funding, and there are 3 different packages within that. One of those packages, or possibly 2, I'd have to double check the detail because it was literally launched yesterday. That does include capital projects. So if your project does have capital costs, I would recommend that you look at the return to sport funding rather than the tackling inequalities funding. Next one, can we apply for on-costs, management fees and administration? So we understand that organisations need to take some of those costs into consideration when running a project, that it's vital to keep the organisation going, but we would only look at appropriate costs around that. As I've already said, we want the money to get directly to those participants around the actual delivery of the activity. So any on costs or management fees that aren't connected to the direct delivery, we wouldn't accept. I know that might sound a bit confusing. If you've got any questions around that, please come directly to us and we can talk you through it if you are unsure whether that funding need will be eligible or not. We have another one, can we apply for retrospective costs? No, you can't. If you've already gone out and paid for some equipment or facility hire, that isn't something that we will cover. So really think about not committing to something prior to having your application approved by us. And then another one, do we need to complete any monitoring and evaluation? Yes, please. We will be sending out details around the monitoring and evaluation if you are approved. And that will be around, obviously, collating participant information, just very basic, like your numbers, which priority audience they are, etc. A lot of the standard things that you would be used to collecting. But then we're also looking for case studies and the real impactful information. So if you can start to think about any case studies and the way you might articulate that back to us, even if you want to collect some video clips or sound bites from participants just about the impact of the project, that would be really helpful, and it really will help us to feed that information back to Sport England about the impact it's had across Birmingham as a city. That's it on the frequently asked questions. I see there might be some more coming through. Alice, do you want to share them?
Yeah, there's just a little bit more around that kind of capital costs theme, really. We've had one around purchasing equipment, which I have responded to in the chat box. Any equipment purchasing is eligible as long as it's really specified clearly and appropriate for the delivery of that specific project. And to the benefit of the participants. We've got it a little bit of unsurety around whether or not building something would be eligible. I think.
So no.
Yeah.
When we talk about capital costs, we're generally talking about fixed assets. So anything that you need to build, or it is literally fixed in place. Like I know quite a few people may consider like bike shelters, a storage unit, for example. That wouldn't be something that we would fund. However, the return to sport funding that Sport England have just released, that would be eligible. So please, if you've got those capital costs, look at the return to sport funding instead of the Tackling Inequalities Fund.
Again, we're happy to have those conversations with you. We would recommend that you go and read up on that Return to Sport Fund prior to any conversations with ourselves, just so that you are better informed, as it were, before coming to have those discussions. Very quickly as well, we've got from Sharon, has just asked around staffing costs and whether or not that's covered for engagement and organisation of events. And would that be classed as direct delivery?
So I might need Sharon to specifically ask the question or elaborate. Staffing costs can be included. We want that to be for direct delivery, and we can fund events, but we will not fund just a one-off event through Tackling Inequalities. So it needs to be part of a wider programme. So it might be you have a 12-week programme and then you build the event into the last week as a bit of a celebration, or a roundup of everything that you've delivered over those 12 weeks, but we won't fund just one event through this fund.
Can I just jump in there, Helen, and explain what I meant? What I meant was, would it be eligible for us to hire a staff member to engage with our disengaged group and to organise ongoing events, not really events, activities, I should have said, not events. So like somebody to actually manage the ongoing organisation of that.
Yeah, so if you're looking at like kind of the project coordinator costs, it's really difficult to say a specific yes or no to that. It really does depend on what their role would be. If they're doing quite a bit of the direct delivery, then great. If they're not, and it's more around those management costs, then we'd have to really look at that specifically, and other projects on a case-by-case basis, really. I wouldn't like to say no, so then you go away and discount applying for the funding. I just probably want to understand a bit more about what that project coordinator would be doing and how the costs relate to that direct delivery.
Right, okay, thank you.
I think as well, that's probably the point, to really look at what the amount of funding that's available for the project, and be realistic about whether or not the project's going to get everything it needs out of that. If there's a large cost going towards new staffing members or anything like that. Again, very much so a conversation that we'd be happy to have, especially if you've got the startup of a plan that you're putting down on paper. We'd be more than happy to just kind of have a chat through that initially.
Any other questions, Alice, or from anybody?
Not at the moment in the chat box, unless I've missed anybody, and by all means, please do speak up.
Okay, let me just see. So, we're already on the question section, but following this, if you do have any other questions, enquiries, please email grants@sportbirmingham.org. and we'll aim to come back to you. Please provide a phone number as well, because it probably will be easy to have that phone conversation rather than over email. I think that's it for that. So I'll just go back to the main screen. Jevon, I'm just wondering, are you back with us, or is your presentation working now? I'm not sure if he's there. Okay. Do we have any other questions before we end the session today?
I don't know whether or not it's worth, Helen, if we just think about maybe a couple of the project examples that we have funded in that phase 1. We can probably just mention a couple of those, just to give an idea around the types of things that have previously been funded.
Yeah, so we have funded organisations to pull together activity packs, and I know that's something that we were looking to kind of pull away from, as organisations did start to re-engage face-to-face with their participants. However, with the potential of going back into some form of stricter lockdown, it may be something you want to consider. So those activity packs have been really useful, particularly people with disabilities or long-term health conditions where they feel particularly vulnerable and maybe shielding and do need to stay at home. They've been really good, particularly with young people, some sensory equipment within those. You really got, if you are going to consider that, please look at the value of those and the cost per pack. That we don't want them to be too high, so then it doesn't allow that engagement with that many people. So again, please speak to us. Some people have included crafts and some arts within their activity packs, but we do want the main focus of them to be physical activity, to be honest. Just trying to think what else we have funded. Yeah, we funded very much that re-engagement with young people, groups, families, where obviously they couldn't do anything during lockdown, so a lot of it has been around that face-to-face delivery. There's been quite a bit that we've funded around online delivery, so where people have needed the funding to access the internet, those digital solutions. Now we will fund some technology costs around whether an organisation might need a tablet or a couple of tablets, so that they can deliver their sessions online. I actually think, Jared.
Yes, so yes.
You're one of our previously funded organisations.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Thank you. My name is Gerard Mbungo, and I work for Sport for Youth organization. It's kind of becoming a national organization because we have branches in the north and the northwest, Manchester and the Sheffield, and now Newcastle. Now we're in Birmingham, and we cover the Northfield area. I've been a chair for Sport for Youth since 2008. We manage like large grant from Football Foundation. I'm a wrestling coach. I went in 2010 in India with one of my athletes. We won a silver medal for the Commonwealth game. We have few football teams. So Sport for Youth is not just about, like Ellen mentioned, it's not just about football. So we have other a range of activity, if it's from pools, swimming, walk, cycling. So we just do whatever young people want. So we like a young people focus. We have a steering group made of young people. They decide what they want us to do. We don't just come up and tell them we want to start a new activity. They decide about new activity during their meetings, and then they organize, they plan it, and we, the management, just go out and look for funding. We target getting our main target audience, ethnic minority group, mainly asylum seeker and refugee. I am kind of one of the role models. I came in this country in 2002 as an asylum seeker, spent 7 years without documents. So I was just like failed asylum seeker. So the only way I was going through mental health issue and being kicked out, being homeless, not getting enough money to live. I was living sometime on £10 a week. So the only way for me to keep alive, to keep faith and have a good spirit was to engage with a community group. So delivering sport, it's great. It's a great tool. And my history is quite long. I finally got a document around 2010. And then I went back to university. I graduated an IT engineer. I'm an IT support.
Have we lost him?
I'm an IT.
Oh no, he's back.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought we'd lost you then, Gerard.
Oh, sorry.
I think just conscious of time and any specific questions people might have actually for you about your project and those people that you and are engaging through your project. Are there any questions that people might have or anything specific you could update people on about those people through this funding?
Yeah, basically we are, I don't know if you want to talk about our target audience or the young people we work with.
Yeah, you can do. That'd be great.
Yeah, basically asylum seeker and refugees, I'd say, as you know, Birmingham's got a lot of asylum seekers, especially the new displaced. So those they still live in the community and they still cannot afford to pay for sport activity, like pay for the subscription fees. So our group helped them to raise funds and deliver those activities for free. We just recently, as Ellen mentioned, we just recently got the grant from phase 1 to equip them to move online. So online, to do online delivery and face-to-face delivery. So it will be a mixture. We'll try to go back and do some face-to-face by reducing groups from 3 to 6. So we may even end up playing 3 against 3. So
I think that's a really good point, actually, where people might be worried about those numbers. And what you've done yourselves as well in your organisation, you've obviously considered those support bubbles, those smaller bubbles that people have to now do, that rule of 6. So where people are looking at their applications and thinking, well, we've got all these numbers that we usually engage, how are we going to go about engaging them over the next few months, because they've got to keep to that rule of 6 or whatever the tier level is telling us for our area. So please consider that, and there may be additional coaching costs that come from having to deliver in small groups. There may be additional equipment costs. There may be additional PPE costs because of that. So some really good points there, Gerard, about how you've had to consider the different delivery options and how you've adapted to the situation, and you're actually going for that mixed offer of online and face-to-face delivery, and really adapting to what could potentially happen over the coming months if we do go into a stricter lockdown. So thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. So we'll be our group will be working through the current situation. If we are in tier 1, we will limit them to a set of number. We move to tier 2. If we move to tier 3, then we bring our activity online. For that reason, we apply for 2 tablets. So we're successful. We got 2 tablets. Our coaches will then set up a remote session, try to engage with those young people. We will buy 6 cheap mobile phone, quite of a mobile phone that can support so many apps, so that we can give it to our young people, and they can then follow the coaches, follow the session, being in the lockdown. We don't hope to be in the territory, but if it happens, then the activity will move on. So
and that's it. You've tried to equip yourselves ready for that situation. And I suppose you've made another good point there, that not everyone does have access to technology. So if digital solutions is something that you want to do, you do want to put into your application, where you may want to purchase a few phones or tablets that you do lend out to your participants. So it wouldn't be for them to keep, but they could borrow them from the organisation for the duration of this project. That would be considered as well. So thank you. And just
What I wanted to mention was some our staff members, some of the volunteers were young people that started the activity, and then they will put them into training. They become now qualified coach, some of the fitness instructor. So those young people are the ones that we re-employ to deliver this session, and the project will last for 6 months. Sorry, because
no, brilliant. No, again, a good point around that sustainability element of your project. You're training up your volunteers or the participants to become volunteers, so then they can come back into the organisation and support from that organisational development side as coaches, volunteers, and it's upskilling them for the future as well, not just specifically for this project. So some really good points. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else that's got any specific questions? If not, then I think we will finish there. Alice, are you able to just give the closing information about sharing the information following today?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we mentioned at the start, we have recorded the session. We'll also have saved the chat box as well. We've noted down some particular questions that have come through from the session today, and we will include those on the website alongside the presentation that Helen has gone through with us this morning. We'll be pulling that together. We'll put it onto the website, but we'll also share with all of the attendees that have joined us this morning as well. So you'll get a direct email with that. In that, we'll include the grants email address for you to approach us with any further questions or points of topic that you want to take further, and we'll pick up with you down the line. We're aware that it's quite a tight time frame for this application, but is the nature of the current climate really, and it's likely that it will be somewhat competitive, and we are expecting quite a few applications. We really encourage you to follow the links provided to inform yourselves as much as possible. I hope that we've covered most of that in today's session anyway, and it's been great to see so many of you come and join us. We will also present in that email just some questions around any future virtual sessions you may be interested in engaging in with us. So we'd really appreciate you coming back with a response on that. So we'll make sure that that's included in the email, just because again, I think it's really important for us to learn and to hear about what you're going to find useful and what you want to hear from us, support wise and information wise going forwards. But I think at the moment that's probably everything for now, unless anybody else has thought of anything that I've missed.
Thanks, Alice. I think we probably haven't got all the answers right here and now with our frequently asked questions, so please come to us if there is something missing from the guidance and it's not being covered today, and hopefully we can answer it and it makes your the process of applying easier.
Wonderful. Well, thanks ever so much, everybody. I can see some people have already gone on to other things, and we're all pretty busy at the moment. But thanks ever so much for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.